Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them and how you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that'll work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable revenue coaching to learn more.
Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very glad to be here. It's a cool kind of full circle moment for me. I 2.5 years ago when I was interviewing at Chili Piper, you had our director of revenue, Michael Tuso, on, and I listened to his episode to help prepare for the interview for my first SDR role. So pretty cool 2.5 years later to be chatting with you.
And now you've taken roughly his old role, which is pretty cool.
A part of it, I can't say I'm doing everything he was doing, but a part of it was, leading our SDR team. And he was one of the most important pillars of building our team. Leading our team now and trying to continue what he did for us.
Love it. If you're wondering how Joey got here, at the end of every episode, I ask, hey, who's the best person you know to invite on the show? And Joey's name's come up a couple of times, and we finally got him on the show, and I'm super excited to have you here. I've said it on a number of episodes already, but you haven't been here. I think Chili Piper sends, your SDRs send the best, most creative, most consistently good emails of any vendor that's currently coming after me, trying to book a meeting with me. I'm always happy to see their email because I know they're not going to be annoying. They're going to be the standard persistent, but not overly so. And the emails are at least a little bit entertaining. And there's one that's she always comes back. She's like, I'll give you this famous recipe I have. It's I think a South African chicken recipe or something like that. She's like, I'll trade you that for a meeting. And I'm awfully tempted, but also I don't want to waste her time because we're not a good account fit. And so I just wanted to lead with Joey's here because not only because a guest recommended him, but because from the emails that I received, Chili Piper always sends the best emails. We're not just talking about email today. We're going to talk about some advanced tactics, and we're going to talk a little bit about timing and why it's more important than everybody thinks. I do want to start with, Joey, tell me about your favorite meeting that you've ever booked.
Oof. For sure. So my favorite meeting, one that I still walk through every new hire, as one of the examples of being persistent, is somebody who I got to agree to a meeting, but 3 months away, which is the classic, they're agreeing to a meeting, but really it's still a timing objection, right? So he was, I think it was January, and I was pretty new into the role, and he's like, let's meet in May. So I got something on the calendar for May. The next day he posted something on LinkedIn, and I messaged him hey, and basically pitched him again based on his post, and was like, given that, any chance we can push up that May meeting to next week or early February? And he was so mad, and he deleted the meeting. He was like, this is completely unprofessional. I'm taking this off. And so I was like, okay, I'm so sorry. I did mess up. Once I got more into the role, I reached back out and I was like, hey, I was a few weeks into the role. I want to admit, I pushed too much there. I completely regret how I dealt with that, and just owned up to the mistake. And he was like, all right, maybe we can get it back on. But then he stopped responding. I followed up with him twice a week until May, until it was the week of our original meeting, which was now off the calendar, but I just had that date still. And 2 days before, he finally accepted, and he was like, yeah, I'll take that meeting on that day. And he did, and now they're a customer. Yes. Yeah. So that was one example where I overstepped, and as an SDR, when you want to be really persistent, you're going to make mistakes like that. And just no matter what SDR you are, you're going to piss off prospects. Sometimes you're just going to send one person one cold email and get a response telling you that you're violating a privacy law, or that person is in a fight with their significant other, whatever it might be. Yeah. So it's going to happen, and really like how you deal with that rejection, how you deal with those mistakes is often what will define how you do in the role. So in that case, just being human and owning up to it and apologizing and then going back to doing my job got him to take a meeting and have legitimate interest.
I don't want to like, if you don't want to dig into this, but I'm curious, you think you went too far by like trying to bump the meeting up? To me, that sounds like super strong SDR skill. That's got
Yeah.
director of sales development written all over it.
That's a good question. Whether I personally think I went too far. Well, I tell our SDRs the line of where you think you've been too persistent is a lot further than you think. So I will tell you if you are doing too much. And in 2 years of leading SDRs, I have never told somebody they were doing too much. So I think like if you are doing, and I have told people this follow-up is not tactical or strategic or going to be interesting to this prospect. And like, that's where we adjust how they're approaching it. But I personally believe that the line of too much is a lot further than you would think, like in an SDR role. So short answer is no, I don't think I went too far, but that prospect did. And you kind of have to like go from there.
So 100% agree. I think that's where I wanted to go with this, because I think what you did was excellent. I didn't want anybody to walk away with the impression that, oh, he went too far by like trying to do this great thing. To your point, the line is always much, much farther than you really think it is. And if you do piss off a prospect, the way you handled that was perfect. Own up to it. Yes, you're right. I made a mistake. I was having a similar conversation with one of our reps, and I was like, if a customer's wrong, like and you're arguing over something, there's no sense in like trying to pin them to the ground if you can just find a way to move the conversation forward. There is no great scoreboard that's keeping track of like, Colin was right this many times out of this many. Like if you could just find a way to move it forward, it doesn't really matter. That's what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to take this pin and move it another 2 feet down the road. And just, you keep stacking those and we're finally going to make progress.
Exactly. And in that case with that person, I was trying to like build a trusting relationship with him. In that moment, I failed at doing that. So a few weeks later when I was like, oh, I was new in the role, I did look back and say, I probably would do that better now. So that's where I was like being definitely honest to myself. Like I would do this differently now. But you're going to piss off prospects, and there's nothing dishonest about meeting them at the fact that you pissed them off and apologizing for it,
100%. I think I look back at stuff I did 3-6 months ago and I'm like, wow, that was dog shit. I could do better.
Right.
I need to do better.
Oh yeah. Things are good when you're consistently able to look back like a pretty short amount of time and see that you've grown or learned since then, just in general, but in sales leadership or sales, definitely.
And one of the things we're going to talk about are some more advanced tactics, but I was wondering, just so we can understand what a great Chili Piper rep looks like, can we talk to me about what you see are some of the basics for email, personalization, those kinds of things?
Yeah. The number one basic is just hunger. Someone who comes in, I have someone, it's his third day today. And he told me today, like there was a web page that wasn't loading. And he was like, I am not a patient person. And I was like, that would not serve you very well in this role if you were. So just like hunger and over the top energy, wanting to succeed really badly is like the number one thing. From there, like you mentioned our cold emails, a lot of that is the strategy we use as a team to personalize emails and target our prospects really effectively. But more than that, a lot of that also is just going to come from the individual research and personalization and relevance that rep brings to the table. And that also just comes from making good hires early in building an SDR team. So early on, when our team was 4 or 5 reps, we had people who, had really good business sense and were intelligent about our market And one could make a good template that still influences the templates we use now, but also just like add a mindset of like how they were going to stick out and how they were going to target our ICP with the research they were doing. And then anytime you bring someone new in, they're learning from those people and seeing all the different examples of a good email that person is sending. And those look different based on the person. I remember an email I sent that was like baseball themed to someone who used to be a minor league baseball player. And it's pretty cheesy, but really made it relevant to what we were talking about. It's like, that's like I've never prospected someone else who was a previous professional baseball player. So that was not something that anyone could have taught me, like, hey, this is what you're going to come across. But I had seen like the creativity that our team had used before, and then that just kind of carries on. And then you look around at the people who are doing well, seeing all the different examples of them using that creativity and relevance in different situations, and you just want to replicate that. So, I think when I see LinkedIn posts that are like, here's my cadence that converts at 60%, like sign up for my newsletter and I'll send it to you. Sometimes that might be something that's going to convert at 60%, but more often than not, it's probably a cadence someone uses where they're just extremely relevant in every email they send, and, do like personalization at scale, and are just a good sales rep.
And that's the hardest thing with like copy pasting information from LinkedIn or even a podcast like this, is the context is so dependent on the relevance of the offering. I'm curious because if I break down what you just said into 4 steps for like sales development basics: hire creative people, get the targeting right, get them to do research, get them to personalize their outreach. We talked a little bit about hiring creative people. Talking about the targeting, like what kind of influence do you have? Does your team have? Does an SDR have over who they're reaching out to?
Yeah, a lot. So we assign accounts each quarter, but that's less than half of the prospecting an SDR here will do are the accounts that we've assigned them. Most of what our success reps are doing is going and either finding new accounts that aren't in Salesforce, or just prospecting in Salesforce, like from accounts that are, by our ROE rules. So they have a lot of influence over who they're finding, how they're finding, what specific triggers they might be looking for on a certain day to prospect someone. Yeah. So yeah, they have a lot of say over it. And then to your copy and pasting point, that is both true externally, so copy and pasting something you see on LinkedIn, but it's even more relevant, I think, internally. I have never seen someone succeed by copy and pasting emails that a top performer was writing. People always try. So a top performer will handle an objection really well, and someone will try to copy that and use that for all objections that are in some bucket. So, okay, that's a timing objection, I'm going to use this, but there's literally things in every sentence of that good objection handling response that are specifically responding to things that prospect said. And that's what made it good. It's not good because it like unlocked the magic of how to get somebody to not have a timing objection. It just listened to that person and responded. And the same goes for prospecting, right? Like there's so many signs of what a person is interested in, or like our ICP is marketing and salespeople. They're very active on LinkedIn. It's different, targeting IT or like a persona that is a lot less active, but there's no excuse targeting, me or you, people who like actively say their opinions, to not, be able to get those pretty easily and incorporate them into why you might be relevant for them.
100%. And before we get into the research and personalized pieces, talk to me about you said your ROE rules. First off, what does ROE stand for, and what are your rules?
Great question. So rules of engagement, basically just being what allows an SDR to work an account. So most simply, it's when can you work an account or when can you not because somebody else has worked it. The standard or like center of our rules of engagement is nobody else can have reached out for at least 30 days. So essentially, if you choose to work an account, it has to have been at least 30 days since anyone else on the team has reached out. And then, once you are done or you move on from that account, it's going to sit for another 30 days before anyone else sits it. To an SDR, those 30 days are forever. To a prospect, it's not very long to be getting outreach from somebody different at the company. Which also, like, back to your point, you've heard from multiple people at Chili Piper. Probably there's been some core things in those emails that are similar. Probably they're not all the same, but that's what they're working with too, is they're working with, like, we've been doing outreach for 5 years or 4+ years pretty consistently on our team. Obviously there's still accounts we reach out to that haven't heard from us. Like I said, a lot of people not in Salesforce yet, but a lot of people have been hearing from Chili Piper reps in one version or another for years. So you have to constantly be, like, not only competing with our competitors, but competing with each other in a way. Because that also helps kind of advance the messaging forward.
Totally. And I'm definitely not getting it every quarter. It seems like I think if I think back, it's probably 2 to 3 times a year I end up in a Chili Piper sequence, which anecdotally feels like a reasonable amount of time, where, like, priorities change every quarter, but I'm not going to change my sales team makeup or drive or whatever every quarter. 2 to 3 times. To me, that feels like that's an appropriate number of times where I can be like, hey, thanks, but still not interested.
Yeah. Well, maybe this will be your ticket to, I don't know if getting off our email list is something you even want, because it maybe keeps you updated on what we're doing and maybe is interesting. But we can talk after this, and I can get you set.
Honestly, it doesn't bother me. I'm like, my only concern is for your poor SDRs who are putting effort into my account. I'm like, at best, this is a few licenses for you. Like, you're not, there's just not a lot of value here for you. Sorry.
Well, you never know. One day when you've grown your team and it makes sense, that lucky SDR will book their meeting on the backs of the 20 SDRs that reached out to you before them.
We're like their white Fender Strat from Wayne's World. When
exactly.
Mind. Yes. So this is kind of the targeting piece, and you mentioned kind of looking for trigger events, which is kind of getting into the research step. And so talk to me about, what are some of the basic research pieces that your reps are looking for?
Yeah. Are they hiring salespeople is one thing, right? Obviously, if they're growing their team, then they're actively investing in how to make their sales team better. That's sort of like at an account level. Talking about speed to lead, right? So Chili Piper specifically allows your inbound sales process to have 0 speed to lead time. So somebody fills out your request a demo form, they get to book a meeting instantly. So anyone in marketing or sales that talks about or engages with content about speed to lead, that's, instead of just sending them our cold email based on the relevance of their company, like, you'd better be, commenting on the fact that they are already talking about this. And if you're not, it's just so obvious that you don't know them. One example for me, I used to just strictly run Chili Piper's SDR onboarding for about 8 months. So on LinkedIn, I was posting 3 or 4 times a month about onboarding, about hiring, and just about the energy of our new hires. And I would still get cold emails that were like, hey, I see your team is growing. Be like, yeah, it's not that my team is growing. It's that I'm literally out here screaming from the rooftops that I specifically am hiring and onboarding, right? So it's like something like that, where it's like, yeah, sales nav will give you that trigger, they're growing, but will that actually feel accurate to the prospect of their experience? It's not just that we're growing, it's that literally I am giving every signal that this is my number one priority. If you don't say that, it just feels like you haven't done your research about your prospect.
Totally. And if you haven't done the work, it doesn't feel relevant. I think it's for you and me, it's like, I feel like you haven't done the work. For the prospect who isn't in sales development, it's probably just going to feel like, yeah, this isn't as relevant. I'm not going to pay that much attention to it. But when somebody sends me an email, I'm like, wow, you nailed my context. If you can read my mind over email without talking to me, just by looking at my social, like, you have my attention.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to just building trust. Whether you are evaluating them as an SDR or not, you are evaluating whether you trust what they're saying, because you know they're in sales. You know they want you to buy their tool because they're in sales, right? That's like the overall objection behind any SDR cold email is, you're a sales rep, you were assigned this account, and you're sending me an email. But to overcome that objection, like, whether you're close to SDRs or not in your role, you need to feel like the email recognizes you and is being sent to you for a reason that is not their manager told them to reach out to your company.
I want to double click on the trigger piece. And I know we're going to talk about advanced tactics, but I am annoyingly curious. That's kind of the theme of the podcast. You mentioned something about you're looking for people talking about speed to lead. Can I assume you're looking at that on LinkedIn? Question one. Follow-up question. How do you find that? Do you have all your reps in something like Hootsuite? Are they just building a lead list or an account list in SalesNav and then waiting for that to pop up? Or is there more forward-looking, or they're doing more digging? You've got some searches that flag when that happens.
So you can, I mean, we're pretty like bare bones in our tech stack as far as research goes. Literally searching in the LinkedIn search, speed to lead. You can also, we use, we'll like upload lists of accounts into SalesNav and get very personal with like lead specific triggers in SalesNav. So for example, you upload 400 accounts, you can narrow down just with like one click people in this list who are, let's say, like marketing and sales leaders for our purposes, but anyone who's in your ICP, we'd say marketing and sales director or higher follows Chili Piper on LinkedIn. Now out of 400 accounts, you've found 6 marketing or sales leaders who already follow your company. And if you reach out to them without acknowledging that they already know something about you or follow you, that again is just like that is negative and going to hurt you. So not only is it a positive opportunity to be very relevant, it also is a risk. Like it literally is a risk of sending a cold email to anyone that you don't know something obvious about them that you should. If somebody from our team sends you a cold email without acknowledging that you had me on your podcast talking about this, for example, please let me know.
I've got some, no, just kidding. I'm pretty sure people have mentioned Michael Tuso, and then they're like, oh, yeah, the last rep might mention Michael Tuso. So we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
And so they're just doing the search there, searching for just in the regular LinkedIn SalesNav search, regular LinkedIn search, which gives you the best results. I find the two seem to be running different search algorithms, and I'll search the same thing and they give me different stuff. So
yeah, I mean, one, so you're saying being in SalesNav versus being in LinkedIn, like the website.
Yeah.
I honestly, just LinkedIn searching tends to be better for just finding LinkedIn posts in general. Yeah.
Fair. I've been prospecting on LinkedIn for a very long time. I know SalesNav has some good stuff. I don't like it. Not because I don't like SalesNav. I just, you know, when you're accustomed to like your old couch, and then somebody buys you a new couch, you didn't ask for a new couch, you wanted your old couch. I want my old couch. And LinkedIn, that's my old couch. I know where everything is. I know what it looks like. I know how to do the Booleans.
Yeah.
For it.
Just like the way the interface has changed, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same experience now because when I was using it actively as a rep, it was so different than it is now. And now when I'm like helping someone new in the role, and that's again like small, just like tidbit of like how the reps are really the ones who are helping carry a good culture forward and help carry good processes forward. Because that's one example. Like I can try to help someone with SalesNav, I am not going to be as good at it as our top rep who is doing it, clicking in there 150 times a day and like really understands all the actual shortcuts and like just minor things that are going to make you 2 or 3 times as efficient. Um, versus me looking at it, I'm like, oh, this isn't the layout I'm used to. I guess you would click here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
for sure.
I signed up for the Sales Nav Premium or whatever for the first time in a long time this month or last month, and it was like everything's different. I hate it. I mean, I don't hate it. I just hate that I hate that I'm used to clicking here and it's somewhere else, and now I feel like I don't know how to use this tool. That I know how to
Sales now, give us our layout back.
Totally. I want my old Boolean searches to work. Those things were great. Anyway.
Yep.
This isn't old people bitching about what a desktop tool looked like 4 years ago. I did want to double click on the research triggers, and then we'll get to personalization, because I think this is an area where you cannot copy what Joey is doing, but you can be inspired by what he is doing on behalf of Chili Piper. And so the first one you talked about, a relevant trigger is hiring salespeople. Another relevant trigger is they're talking about speed to lead, something very, very important that Chili Piper solves. What are some other triggers that you're looking for?
Yeah. Being active on LinkedIn in general is a trigger specifically for whether you want to prospect them on LinkedIn, right? If somebody's posting all the time on LinkedIn and you're prospecting them, but not having LinkedIn be a big part of how you're prospecting them, again, you're missing where they are. What else for Chili Piper specifically? I mean, promotions. Somebody moves into a new role. That is a very important context in which you're reaching out to them. So I moved into our director of sales development role 2 months ago. So if someone's reaching out to me right now, the context of them reaching out to me should be, oh, like you just moved into this role. You're probably figuring out what your priorities are and like some of the first things you want to implement. That would be important context for anything that I am buying right now would be, I'm new in the role and I'm figuring out what I want to implement here. So yeah, role changes, talking about topics that are relevant to your company, and what you can offer them, interacting with things that are relevant to it, following your page, but also following competitors or following, maybe other companies that you partner with or are similar to. Like Gong is obviously like anyone who's following Gong and like involved with things they're posting is likely going to be in like the B2B SaaS space, or at least interested in it, and therefore would be someone that we would want to talk to.
I love the relevant companies approach, because like you and Gong are competitors, and so Gong's probably not going to mind if you're looking at their engagement and prospecting to people that are engaging with people's posts. I think there's like following companies, and then there's like engaging with relevant companies is another really interesting way that shows that, hey, this person is active on LinkedIn, but also thinking about the related space.
Yeah.
I say this not to go and for every person who's in sales tech to go and copy and go follow Gong and then prospect everybody in the comments.
No, but it's relevant for anyone. Yeah. I mean, think about if you're I think it's helpful to use an example that is not literally what Chili Piper is doing. Like if you're someone who is prospecting to people leaders or HR leaders, like if you're like a people analytics tool, for example, what are some companies that are leaders in like HR or like people team operations, companies that are leaders in that, and then go find people who are following them, who are in your ICP. And those are going to be people who, if you're selling like a modern people analytics tool, you want to sell to people leaders who are interested in staying up with modern technology. Those people will likely be following or engaging with whoever a leader in that space might be, whether they're a competitor or not. So for us, we want people who are interested in like modern revenue technology. So Gong is one of the leaders in that space. They're not a competitor, but there's going to be a lot of overlap. And if our ICP is looking at them, they would be more relevant.
So how do we go from, because it's, to go back to the initial kind of four things that were important: hire creative people, figure out like really strong targeting, really strong research, and then great personalization. So if somebody's, say, following a people leader, and I'm going to try not to say people eater because that's what I heard. I know you weren't talking about cannibalism.
Hopefully that is addressed.
Maybe the strangest SDR. Yeah, I see you're interested.
Yeah.
How do you go from following Gong to finding a way to tie that in so it's relevant to the sales leader? Like, this is that kind of personalization step. What are some, obviously you don't have to walk through this exact example, but I'm curious, what are some ways, if we've done the research, now how do you teach your reps to build on that research?
Yeah. So first thing, and this is going to sound like a cop out by changing the trigger, but we'll come back to just if they're only following Gong. The first thing is not like, be careful to not, just because you researched something and found it out, just need to tell them that. Like, I get an email that's like, hey, I saw you went to the University of Maryland. When is that ever relevant, right? They took the time to notice that. And so essentially what they're doing is telling me, hey, I took the time to look at this. So once you've taken the time to like learn something about that person, so they follow Gong, take it a step further and make sure you can find something that is the most relevant possible for you to say to them. So if they follow Gong, check if they're also posting and contributing their own ideas, like to the space or talking about something that is very relevant. And then you have something. You see that they've posted about speed to lead or posted about wanting to make sure that they have like the most modern tech stack. Literally a lot of people in that space will have posts or engagements like asking questions about what other revenue leaders are using. That then is what you want to hone in on, focus on. You don't have to say, hey, I saw you followed Gong, so then I looked at your post. Like, they don't care about your experience of finding it, but it's one way in which, like, almost just like a green flag of like, oh, they might be engaging with this. Let's see. But back to just only that trigger. Let's say you see that and they've never posted on LinkedIn and there's nothing more relevant. I guess off the bat, just like, hey, I see that you follow Gong, like they're a partner of ours. We use them and love them. Not sure if you use them at whatever company you're at, but here's how Chili Piper could potentially help if it's a focus of yours to have your AEs booking meetings. I would edit that email before sending, but
that. Yeah. There's stuff on the fly to make a point, like directionally correct, but these are not the words.
Oh yeah.
I always preface like every first version of an email I send first. I'm like, this is bad. I did an intentionally shitty first version, and the next version will get better. And we're going to test the shitty one, but we want to see how it turns out first.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think when I said earlier, the new SDR said, I'm not a patient person. Being someone that has a bias for action is going to help you as an SDR a lot. So yes, this email could be better. I'm going to send it and my next email will be better. Like, I think that is an important mindset of like, it is rare. It does happen, but it's rare that you're going to send an email, but like, that is perfect. It will happen sometimes that you feel that way about it. That doesn't mean it's going to book a meeting. So when even the most perfect email is not guaranteed to book a meeting, having a bias towards like, making it relevant, making it good, then just sending it and moving on and doing another one, like it's kind of the only way that you'll be able to see results from it. Very important asterisk next to be relevant.
100%. I have to remind myself all the time, now is better than perfect.
Yep. Absolutely.
You bring up an interesting idea though, because timing is so critical. If you've nailed the targeting, you've nailed the research, the promote, like the personalization, you sent the first email. Why? One of the things we talked about in our pre-interview is you actually said that it's not all of that that's the most important. Those are the basics, but those aren't the most important. Timing is the most important. So help me understand why all these really awesome really good things that you're doing aren't relevant at all.
Yeah.
And maybe not relevant at all, but help me understand why timing is even more important.
Yeah. Well, I think a common mistake I see is focusing on, okay, we're A/B testing our messaging. Therefore, we're going to improve our results and get to the results we need to see. Whereas you want your messaging to be relevant. We've put a lot of work into that. What will more influence the outcome than making your messaging marginally better is making sure that once you're sending those emails, you're capitalizing on those by actually prospecting this individual. And when I say actually prospecting them, you can't just run someone through a sequence and expect anything to happen. It will sometimes. I always tell our reps, like, putting people into our cadences can get you 50% to quota. If putting people into our cadences ever gets our team 100% to quota, our quota will double. Because like there's at that point a computer could do your job, right? There's like some relevance, but if just putting someone into a cadence could book a meeting, like you're not actually getting efficiency out of your team. The human element of the role comes in the strategy and the timing and the creativity. So when someone opens your email, how are you answering your own question of just how do I book this person right now? They open your email once. Okay, now it's like game on. How can I book a meeting with them right now? And that might mean you call them at that moment, you leave them a voicemail. They don't listen to it, but they see your name and company in the little visual voicemail on their iPhone. And then they see your LinkedIn message pop up 2 minutes later, like, hey, just left a voicemail. Was looking at, in Chili Piper's instance, was looking at your request a demo form again and had some ideas on how we could help. It's almost like at that point, like being prospected by you is an experience, right? It's like, I am for whatever else is going on in my day, like an experience I am having is being prospected by this person versus 99% of the time when you get prospected by someone, maybe you'll open the email, but pretty much that just means you opened it and marked it as read and moved on, right? More often than not, you're not going to give that much time of your day to just a cold email. And yeah, maybe they'll send a second cold email 2 days later. And to them, oh, I'm sending a second email, I'm being persistent. But more often than not, that just looks like another new email from an SDR that they're going to delete. So it's like, how are you weaving your outreach together to stand out? How are you making it personal? And that comes from like really consistently and strategically using email, LinkedIn, and calls together. Like that to me, like I haven't seen another like sort of secret recipe to standing out than just making sure that you're using all three of those at the right time strategically.
Gotcha. And so if I were to take this advice and to say, okay, every person that opens my email is going to get an email, a phone, and a social touch. Is that good enough? Is that too much? Directionally correct? Or am I missing the kind of nuance of what good timing looks like?
Directionally correct, and then doing it again 2 days later. To be very prescriptive, I would say start at anyone who opens your email once. You will find your own limit where eventually it's too many people to follow up with, and it needs to be anyone who opens your email 2 times or 3 times. Like that's going to be different for everyone. But let's just say, to be really prescriptive, anyone who opens your email once, they're going to get a call if they have a phone number. They're going to get a LinkedIn message if they've accepted your request. If they haven't, they're going to get a request, right? So like, it's really just in that moment, making sure you're like, okay, I need to do everything I can to book this person right now. That includes calling them if you have a number. That includes messaging them if they've accepted, or at least sending them a request again. If not, sending another email like, hey, wanted to make a video to highlight what I was just talking about, and that's going to take you more time, be even more tailored to them and relevant, but you can't do that for 70 new leads a day that you want to add or whatever it might be. So like everything is about just like your funnel is going to get more narrow and more narrow. And as it gets more narrow, you need to be more focused and strategic about those people. Like literally to the point where you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, how am I going to book Colin today? You know, like, oh my God, like Colin has been engaging with everything I've sent. Like he's going to respond today, and then work backwards from there. Yeah.
Love that. I when I see when I used to run our sales development team in the early days, and then when I was running the like our outbound teams, I didn't like walk around the office and stand over people's shoulders. But one of the things that I hated to see was people replying to emails. Like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm just replying to an email. I'm like, why? Like, oh, well, he sent me an email. Like, they just sent you an email right now. They're like, yeah, I want to get back to him. What's top of mind? Like, what's going to have a higher conversion rate? Phone or email? They're like, oh, phone for sure. I'm like, and you're choosing to email them. They're like,
Right. Their phone numbers, their signature. Like,
right.
Exactly. And even just think about then, like, they give you an objection. You call them, they don't answer, and then you reply to their email. And you're like, hey, just tried to give you a call. Like, just that sticks out at the top. You're like, that is like, it creates some urgency. Like you're showing urgency. You're showing like, oh, I want to reply to this urgently and answer your question. And it creates it on their side too. And it's the same thing where, like, just in general, you send them the cold email, then you sent them a LinkedIn message, which means as an experience for them, they see a little circle with your face in it, which they don't see if they're not opening your email, right? Like suddenly they've gotten a slightly more like personable experience from you. If they've listened to your voicemail, they've heard your voice. Now, the next time you send an email, like maybe they haven't responded at all, but the next time you send an email, they're like, oh yeah, that's this guy from Chili Piper. Like, and it just feels, it's going to feel less to them like a marketing email that just was mass blasted to 200 people. And it's going to feel more like, oh, Joey from Chili Piper is reaching out to me again. And just make them engage with it differently.
Mass blasted is 200 people. Yeah, blasted 200. Yeah. I'd be having people that are sending like 20,000 emails of the same copy. Yeah, probably not getting delivered. You probably, but anyway,
right?
Different story.
Yeah.
When we're talking about multi-threading, if somebody like, if I think about the first four basics: creative people, good people, targeting, research, personalization, and then we come into multi-threading, this brings us back into, phone, email, social. Are they going back and doing another research step here, or has the research already been done? Like, is that something that's considered here? I'm just trying to get a feel for once somebody replies, once somebody engages, this is what happens. Because I love, and it sounds like maybe there is some, I don't know if there's blocking or non-blocking calls in your sequences, but it sounds like a lot of engagement-driven activity, which I'm a big fan of. And so maybe first question, blocking, non-blocking calls, or just calling engagement. And then once you are going back into this kind of multi-threading approach off of engagement, are they going and doing more research, or is that already done?
Yeah, great question. So any response you get typically should trigger some additional research. I'll give one example. One time I was coaching a rep, and he was showing me how he replied to an objection. The objection started with, I know Chili Piper, and then moved on to other things. The prospect did not say whether he had used Chili Piper, didn't say how he knew it. Obviously, like, without reading on in the email, that's the first thing you want to know. Oh, he knows Chili Piper. Has he used it? Has he just heard of it? So I asked the SDR, like, has he been a customer before? And the SDR didn't know, but had already responded to the email. Mm-hmm. Any time, like, you already have that warm lead, like I said, like, the funnel gets narrower and narrower. You have to be more and more prepared and show them, that they're going to read your email. They've already responded. That means, they're 80% likely to open and read your email versus 40% a step earlier. So already, like, you need to be more and more prepared at that stage. So literally, in that case, go through that person's LinkedIn. How do they know Chili Piper? Like, have they used us before? Then you can say, oh, makes sense you know us. I saw you used us at this company. that already is like, that person's already responded. Now they're way more bought in. Like, oh, this person does their work, right? Another example would be if they say, oh, I'm not the right person. Instead of saying who is the right person, this is like kind of a common tactic that gets passed around, I feel, but it's another example of this. Is like, one SDR might just say, oh, who's the right person, and never get a response. The other SDR would say, oh, makes sense. Looking at it, I see that Colin is leading your sales team. Is Colin the right person? Would you mind making an introduction? Now you've like done the work for them and have a specific request versus just like, hey, tell me who the right person is, like, AKA rat out one of your coworkers who's now going to get sales outreach from me.
Totally. Can I make an observation? SDRs, you've got, it's a high pressure role, right? It's not an easy role. I've been the person that had to make my 50 calls every morning as an AE. I've had quotas. It's so easy to get into this, into the flow of like, I got to get as much volume done, and not necessarily volume calls or volume emails, but activity. I want to, like, I'm getting in there, I'm going to drink a bunch of coffee, and I'm just going to like hammer it. And that mindset of like, go as fast as I can serves you well when you're trying to get as many of these prospected and researched and personalized and all of that. But what I'm noticing is that once you're seeing engagement, you're coaching your reps to slow down. Like, hey, let's downshift for a minute here.
Yep.
You're going, 100 miles an hour to try and get all this activity out throughout the day. When we get engagement that's worthwhile, let's downshift twice and just slow it right down and take a look, because we want to see in higher fidelity. We want to invest a little bit more time. Yes, we're still trying to hit that goal of this and this and that. But if we have somebody who's live on the line here, or at least more likely to respond, now is the time to spend some of that time and attention investing a little bit more and getting better reply out of them. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. And that is very related to something we talked about before this, of just like the story of booking a meeting. And when you asked me what my favorite meeting I booked was, at no point did I mention what the cold email I sent was, right? Everything I talked about was after that slowing down. And that's like, that's when you book the meeting. Again, 50% of your quota might come from putting somebody into your cadence. But one, what will make it more interesting, make you learn the most, and get you over your quota is going to be the things that are unique to that prospect and unique to booking that meeting. You can't do that by copy and pasting. You have to do that by slowing down, exactly in the way you just said. So that's when it comes to like, when you ask someone how they booked a meeting, they're going to talk about, I slowed down, like I thought about this objection, I did this extra research, I got this specific customer story that was relevant to what they said, and it wasn't just, oh, well, I copied Maria's objection handle that she used and they booked. Like, that's rarely going to be the story.
If we're talking about objections here, I can imagine an SDR sitting on the listening to the podcast going, well, I've just sent this person an email. How do I justify sending them the exact same email again, or sending maybe not the exact same email? Obviously, you wouldn't send that a minute apart, but on LinkedIn and then making the phone call. How do you talk to somebody like that who's like, oh, I don't want to, send the same content 3 times?
Yeah. I think it breaks down to any follow-up. You do need to justify your reasoning for following up again. I think the 2 main things you can add with following up are, 1, adding something legitimately interesting or valuable that was not in your previous outreach. Mm-hmm. Your prospects, ideally you have a reason that you're reaching out to them. There's probably something not from your message that you might be able to tack on. The second thing would just be to literally make a joke out of how persistent you're being. At B2B MX, a conference in Scottsdale last week, I literally met someone. I saw on her name tag, like I recognized her name. And after like 10 seconds of thinking about, wow, I was like, I think I prospected you as an SDR. And then she looked at my name and she recognized me. and we pulled up this LinkedIn thread where I had been so persistent, but it was like a lot. Everything was either, I see your sales team is continuing to grow. Here's how we can help them hand off meetings. Or it was me literally making a joke about that I was following up again to book a meeting or sending like a GIF or something else. So I mean, that's where like, you rarely does anyone get into sales to hopefully be given a script and follow it and hit their number, right? They get into sales because they feel like they have a specific skill set or quality that can like lead to success in it. So often when those parts of the job actually comes up, people get scared and want a playbook to success. But like, if there was one thing you could send that would book meetings, a computer would do it, and you wouldn't get paid to do it, pretty well. So I think it's just like, that comes down to like, be yourself, be creative, and like figure out how to legitimately justify sending them another meeting. One random thing that I came up with as an SDR is when I would send our Chili Piper booking links. So like, if I was ready to book a meeting, I would send them our Chili Piper suggested times. It will insert some specific times into the email that they can click to book, but it will also say view full calendar. So it's pretty straightforward. If you need more times, you click view full calendar and then you can book. But specifically, I would not send any like additional context or instructions in the first email. I would just send the times. Literally 2 hours later, if they didn't respond, I would follow up and say, hey, by the way, forgot to mention, if none of those times work, feel free to click view full calendar, which like anyone can figure out how to do, right? But I was just like, I would send that initially in the first email, and then it occurred to me that like, that could be my excuse to follow up. And then, 90% of the time, if they hadn't clicked the times in the first email, and I was an SDR, I was anxious for them to click and book a meeting and have it pop up in our Slack channel, right? Like, if they hadn't done it within 2 hours, I would do that follow-up, and 90% of the time, they would click it very quickly, just basically because, he followed up again, like, I'm going to like do this before I go into my next meeting, so he doesn't think I haven't seen it.
I love that. Little pieces like that where you're like, oh, I forgot to send this, or I forgot to mention. It's the hand on the doorknob trick where you're like, for people that used to sell or prospect in person, like walking out the door, you're like, oh, one more thing before I go. I'm facing out the door in this example. You're like, oh, just before I go. It's like
exactly.
It's a really, really late PS. I love that. While we're talking about stories, I did want to land the episode by talking about something interesting you've been doing on Mondays. We had a kind of discussion. This is why don't you tell us, what is this Monday SDR training look like for you? What are some of the new things that you started doing? And let's talk about, their impact.
So our SDR team is divided into two teams. We have a North America team and an EMEA team. It very much like is culturally one team. Like, everyone is collaborating with each other, helping each other, doing Zoom blitzes, or call blitzes together on Zoom, like just whenever they want to do them. But every Monday, our whole team gets together, where we basically, for the whole team, do like, where are we at for the month, and look at like some of the meetings that have been booked by the team, and specifically outline like everything that SDR did to book that meeting, to just show again, like, every week this is going to look different. It's never going to just be like this individual sent the cadence and booked a meeting. It'll be how they highlighted the specific objection or all the different follow-up they did to stand out. And just again, kind of like landing that message that like it's followed up with, a full training that might be related to what that person did to book the meeting, or just be a continuation of our training themes for the quarter. But really to land the message that like, nobody who's booking a lot of meetings is doing so in just one way that they're going to be able to tell you. And that's like the most common mistake, is someone starts booking a lot of meetings. So then anyone who wants to be performing better puts 15 minutes on that person's calendar and says, what are you doing? And the answer is very rarely, encapsulated in 15 minutes, because it's not one thing. It's different things for every single prospect, for every single person that just answers like the one question of how do I book this person today?
I love that. I love highlighting the stories and the kind of, it gives you an opportunity to not just highlight the template or the individual, but the sort of the core principle kind of at play of this is why that thing worked, so that you have an opportunity to not just highlight that, but really pull out this is what's most important, so that you don't get your best rep and 13 SDRs put in 15 minutes. Like there was a whole day. That used to happen to my reps when they had a client that was killing it. And we had to start doing lunch and learns, because you'd have one client that was killing it and everybody's reaching out to that one account strategist. And then that account strategist is like, hey, I can't handle all this. I don't want to say no, but I need time to do my work. And so we just instituted it came naturally, just like a lunch and learn we would do once a week, once every other week if we had something interesting. I love the continuing education and getting people to share spirit of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joey, it's been amazing having you on the show. By now, if you're listening and you want to work for Joey, obviously you better be using this podcast or something he said in here to personalize. And if you don't, and you reach out to Joey, I'm coming after you. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll send you an email that is unpersonalized. If they're trying to reach you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Just Joey Williams on LinkedIn, Director of Sales Development at Chili Piper.
Love it. Not Chili Pepper, even though
Not Chili Pepper. Exactly.
I know Michael hated that. So I thought, I'm like, I'll break that for the sake.
I'm used to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for having me. This was great.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.